Hey everybody, Tim Parrish here with your Friday Five. Have you ever watched one of those World's Strongest Man competitions? You know, the kind where those ginormous dudes come and compete in all these unreal tests of strength. And at the end, one will be crowned with the title World's Strongest Man. And when he's finished, there's no doubt that he really is. But there's also no wonder that he's able to do those things, because you look at him and you can see muscles in places where most people don't have muscles. And the ones that he has, they're huge. Largely because he spent years training his body and eating and training and eating some more in order to be able to do those things. But in Judges, we read about a man who was also possessing superhuman strength. But I don't think Samson had any of those big muscles. When people looked at him, they often wondered, how can he do those things? You see, you and I know about Samson what they didn't know, that God was the source of his strength. Before he was ever born, Samson's parents were told that he would be a Nazirite, that he would be devoted or dedicated for his entire life to God. And there were certain things that he would do or not do. Among those things, he would never cut his hair. Well, Samson did some pretty wild things along the way, like taking a lion and ripping it apart by its jaws, or taking a donkey's jawbone and killing 1,000 enemy soldiers. Or there was that one time that he was trapped in a city and there was no way out, so Samson just pulled the city gates up and carried them up the mountain while he walked away. Well, his enemies were also the enemies of God's people, the Philistines. And God was using Samson as one of the succession of judges or deliverers who would free God's people from oppression. But Samson had one glaring weakness. Samson couldn't control his lust. He had an eye for ladies, and if it was a woman that he shouldn't be with, if it was a woman who was bad for him, he wanted her all the more. And it began with the very first woman that he married. And he simply looked at her and said, I gotta have her. He went to his mom and dad and said, whatever it takes, you gotta get me that woman. And that kind of set the tone for that part of Samson's life. Eventually, he sort of settles down with a woman named Delilah. The only problem was Delilah was also in bed with the Philistines. And they had offered her a very large sum of money, about 25 pounds of pure silver, in order to extract the secret of Samson's strength. They wanted to take him out, and they knew they couldn't do it by themselves. Well, she begins to ask in the way that only she could, and he begins to give her false answers. But each time Samson gives her a false answer of something that would take his strength away, she tries it while he's asleep. You would think that would have been a pretty good warning to him to stop telling her things. But as the Bible describes this, beginning in Judges chapter 13, chapter 14, 15, 16, what we find is that, well, she nagged him to death. When he couldn't take it anymore, he finally told her, all right, you want to know the source of my strength? I've never cut my hair, and if somebody cuts my hair, it'll take my strength away. So, no surprise to any of us, when he goes to sleep, she cuts his hair. And sure enough, as the vow is broken, his strength is gone. And the Philistines take him. They gouge out his eyes, and they begin to use him as a form of entertainment. The former strong man, now unable to really do anything. Eventually, as the story goes, God grants Samson's strength to him one more time. His hair regrows in captivity. And he pushes down the columns of a temple where the Philistine people have gathered. And many of them lose their lives along with Samson. What's the lesson from this, though, for a ball team, for an individual? Well, the lesson is this. Sometimes we need to recognize that our strength is nothing, but God's strength is everything. But we also need to know our own weaknesses. We also need to know those points where we are most vulnerable, because those are the points at which our enemy will attack. No one comes at you from your strongest side. They look for your weakest side. The devil is the same. He comes after us in our weakest point, in our weakest moment. May we be stronger than Samson, Not physically, no. I don't need to pull up any city gates, and I'm not touching a donkey's jawbone. But may I be strong, may you be strong when the enemy comes at my vulnerable, weak moments, in my vulnerable, weak places. In those moments, more than anywhere else, I need the strength of God. World's strongest man? I don't know. Maybe Samson was. Maybe sometimes the world's weakest man. But I'm reminded that Paul said of God that God's strength is made perfect in our weakness.